Good afternoon, everyone. And the irony isn't lost on me that you've joined possibly the last of the graveyard slots after lunch. And what have you chosen to listen to? The subject of death. It is, I think, very much the last taboo. In fact, I've noticed that the word taboo has been mentioned several times during different sessions today, and is in another subject line, is in another session as well. Yet, it is very much an issue that is little talked about, not only in the workplace, but also across families and the society as a whole in the UK. Yet it is one of life's few certainties. It shouldn't come as a shock, but it's going to happen to all of us, and it's going to affect every single one of us, and it's difficult, and we can't avoid it. And we'll explore several reasons as to why that might be, in terms of why we don't talk about it, how we can plan for it better, how we can deal with it. And when I was preparing for today's session, I came across a quote which perhaps puts a different light and perspective onto the matter of death. Only a short quote, and I'll use it almost as a golden thread through the rest of the 15 minutes or so. And it goes something like this. When you're dead, you don't know you're dead. The pain is felt by others. The pain is felt by others. So what can we do to help ensure and relieve the burden of the others when we pass? And what's the role of the employer? So that's something we'll be exploring more over the next 15 minutes or so. And to help me with that, I have drawn on some research conducted by MetLife. We spoke to about 2,000 adults in the UK on the exciting topic of death, talking about it, dealing with it, planning for it. And I'll draw on some of the statistics and insights from that report. But I thought I'll also layer in, bearing in mind we're at REBA today, some employee perspectives as well. So what do they expect? What do they value? What do they actually get from employers when it comes to the matter of death? And from an employer's perspective, how can we better prepare and support people through the worst days of their lives? First stat. Are you ready for the first stat? It's going to be a bit statistic, so I have got a number of notes to remind me of all the different figures because my memory isn't quite what it was. When we spoke to the 2,000 people across the UK, 1 in 3 had lost someone, had been bereaved within the last 2 years. I don't know about you, but that strikes me as quite a high figure, and partly explained perhaps by the pandemic. We know that COVID took many lives, particularly amongst the elderly, the infirm and the vulnerable, but it spanned across generations as well. Yet, when these people have been bereaved, and we talked about who did you share that news with, who did you talk to, who did you turn to for support, only 3% had actually spoken to their boss or their employer. 97% had chosen not to. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty alarming high statistic. There's not a lot of, it's 50-50, it's 97 versus 3%, right? So that starts to illustrate, I think, just the height and extent of this taboo, but also perhaps a gap in the service and support available and relationship between employer and employees. It is the final taboo. I've been really pleased in listening in some of the sessions today, just how some of the historic taboo conversations and subjects have changed over recent years. Things such as mental health, menopause, men's health, diversity, neurodiversity, all these things now are becoming far more common in everyday conversations. Less of a stigma, more support available. Yet death remains, by and large, the unspoken reality that little of us talk about or plan for. And when we talk about death, we also spoke to our respondents about what plans have you made for your funeral, for your final goodbye. And some of you may remember, you just cast your mind back to the 19th of September last year. You think, oh, what was I doing on the 19th of September? There was an event that was watched by 37 million people in the UK, 4 billion people worldwide. Do you know what that event was? The funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Now that was a funeral plan, right? That was well ordered and well planned. I'm not expecting everyday folk like ourselves to go to the similar extent. Perhaps we're not so popular. And we explore this issue with our respondents. only 1 in 20, 5%, had actually planned their funeral. And that was pretty consistent across all age bands, even older people. 1 in 3 of the respondents hadn't made any thought, given any thought to their funeral at all. So each of us sit along the spectrum in some way. So there's the two ends of this spectrum. So I thought, as a bit of involvement, participation, up for a bit of participation. I think you have a Slido thing. Do we have a Slido thing? We do. What I'd like to do, there are no right or wrong answers on this one, I hasten to add. It's totally anonymous, a bit like Vitality, so I won't be showing any data anywhere else. But I'd just like you to put yourself in one of the following categories. Are you the carefree? You don't really care, you're not going to be here. Doesn't really matter, does it? Are you an ostrich? Now, these sorts of people tend to worry about things a bit more, but perhaps hide away from actually doing anything in fear of upsetting people. Are you a thinker? You might have thought about this. Look at this. Are you a thinker? You might have thought about this, but really don't know where to start. Or are you a planner? Are you the person who has planned their funeral, documented it, and shared it with the rest of the family? So I see how that was switched there from I'm a planner, to not so much. So, and we'll just compare how you compare with the general population. So the vast majority of thinkers have been thinking about this. It's good, pretty reflective of perhaps the audience. The ostriches really don't want to think about it. A few planners and not that many carefree. Okay, can we switch back to the slides? Or just share some of the statistics that sit behind some of these categories. So the carefree, actually, in our survey of 2,000 people, 1 in 5, nearly a quarter actually, hadn't thought about their funeral at all, didn't want to think about it. I'm not going to be here, not going to worry about it, somebody else's problem. Come back to that in a minute. We found there were a number of ostriches. And the reason here why I hadn't gone about planning their funeral was there's real discomfort about talking about the subject with other people and perhaps the fear of upsetting people. So that's about 14%. There's also some superstitious ostriches out there. So about 8% of people really don't want to think about their funeral because they fear it's going to tempt fate. You think, well, you're in for a bit of surprise there. Then you've got the thinkers, and these are the people who have thought about, had considered, but really don't know how to go about it. And about 12% of people don't know what steps to take. Where do I start? Who do I go to? How do I put it into place? A further proportion as well are also a little bit worried that by actually setting out the wishes, they might cause upset and tension within the family. You know, why do I have this conversation now when if I'm past, I don't need to worry about that? And some felt they'd be misunderstood. And then the planners, probably representative, as I said, about 5% of the population have actually documented and planned and shared their funeral. Why is that important? Well, 19 out of 20 of us haven't. Remember, the pain is felt by others. So let's just move on to a different part of the survey. We talked about those who've been recently bereaved, and I apologise for anyone who has been recently bereaved. These findings and some of these emotions may resonate very strongly with you, but it's important that we share some of these concerns and the impacts. As I said, if we don't stop that now. If we don't put our wishes or share our wishes, then we're actually putting the burden on those that we leave behind, our loved ones, to make all those decisions for us. In fact, only 1 in 2 of the bereaved knew what their wishes were from the loved one that passed. Imagine what additional strain that involves. Not only do you have to go through the process of grief and dealing with the funeral, you don't really know what they wanted to happen, how they wanted it to happen. So really, really stressful. So it's important, again, the pain is felt by others. What can we do as individuals and perhaps as employers to help people plan for their funeral, plan for their final goodbye, and make sure that removing or relieving the burden for their loved ones. Some further issues as well is that, back to as I said before, people really don't know where to start. It's a complex, difficult situation to be in. Anybody who's been involved in arranging a funeral, it's a frightening prospect. And frankly, you have to deal with it in a very short period of time. You can't hang around and we'll get round to the funeral in 3 or 4 months' time. There's something you need to put to bed, literally. It's also difficult at that time to make decisions. Emotionally, your brain's a mush, and it's really difficult to navigate and to understand what you need to do, when you need to do it at such a stressful time. There's some more problems as well, some more challenges. So what about putting our plans in place before? One of the important documents is a will. And there's a fair bit of talk about wills, actually, but only 4 in 10 of us actually have a will. It's not a premise of the rich and famous. Everybody should have a will. Really, it's a legal document that expresses your wishes. Particularly if you're in a blended family or a common law relationship, even more important, because what you expect might happen won't happen, because the state will make those decisions for you. And probate can last anything between several weeks to, I had a case last week at MetLife, it lasted 3 years until the estate was settled. So it's important to make a will. There are some financial aspects to funerals as well. I don't know what you believe the average cost of a funeral might be nowadays. Anybody hazard a guess? About £4,500, quite specific. Thank you very much. It's between £4,000 and £6,000, and it varies quite significantly regionally. No surprise there, but also in a local matter as well. If I looked at the local undertakers in my area, it varies for the same service, same thing, same coffin, by about £2,000. Now, back to if you're bereaved, you're not really in a position or in the right frame of mind to do a kind of compare the undertaker exercise, are you? But that just demonstrates that that these have financial consequences. The overall cost of dying is expected to be around £9,000. That's funeral and additional expenses and everything else. So that's quite a significant amount of money to find. For our respondents, a third of them thought and expected that those costs would be funded by the estate of the person who passed away. Now, if they haven't made a will, that may not be so straightforward. And if you're like me, probably most of us are, then we live our lives on one of these things. Not only social media and contacting friends on WhatsApp and posting on LinkedIn that I'm at REBA today, but also all our banking records, DDs, service providers, mortgage lender, everything else. That's all hidden behind passwords in our phones. People, as it says there on the slide, are estimated to have over 100 passwords. That's quite difficult. Again, another hurdle that people face as they're bereaved. How could we help with that? So we also asked people what they really want in terms of tangible support. The big winner out of this was, if I've been through this process, it would have been really helpful to have a clear outline and understanding of what steps I'd need to follow to arrange a funeral. What do I start with? Who do I need to speak to? What forms do I need to fill in? How can I get the help? When do I get that help? The second was, that's pretty helpful in terms of giving me the guidance and steps I need to follow, but also, can I have some advice? A trusted advisor or somebody who can talk me through these sorts of issues, what I can do and how to do it, because I'm really not in that mental state to follow logic and normal course of decision making. And it also welcomes some emotional support as well, if I need it. We also asked, I said here, we add the layer of, what about your relationship with your employer? We heard earlier that very few people broke the news to their employer. There's some quite startling stats here as to how employers support or perceive to support their employees. So those who have been bereaved, 15% said they'd had no support from their employer whatsoever. No paid time off, no money, no support, no practical support, no emotional support. So really worrying stat here, which kind of freaks me out a little bit, is this 75% of employers not seen as not being supportive. I don't really understand what that means, but that might be because nobody talks about death. You might get some life insurance, that's probably it. But that's an interesting dynamic from an employer's perspective. Bearing in mind this end of life, the most important time and the worst days of your life if you're bereaved, not seen as supportive. 1 in 3 were not aware of the support available they had from the employer, just didn't know what was available. In fact, another 20% or so felt that they were kind of partially aware but really didn't know what it was or how to access it. So awareness was really low. What they did highlight as what would be really valuable, doesn't always happen, is a third of people would like some paid time off to grieve. So you can not worry about or have that guilt complex of having to go back to work or feeling you have to get back to work. But you've got that period of time to grieve and to arrange things, put your affairs in order. So my question to you as rewards professionals, HR professionals, brokers is, I think some action we need to take. There's two requests I have of you. Firstly, why not pop over to the MetLife stand, Stone 64, grab part 1 of the report and find out a bit more. But also consider what arrangements you have in place in your workplace. Consider this from 3 different dimensions. What practical support can you provide in terms of guidance? That may be pre-planning to arrange wills, funeral planning, but also how can you support staff members who are bereaved or in fact dependents of your own staff who may have passed away during the most difficult time of their lives. And don't forget the emotional aspect as well. And bear in mind, I know, there's a lot demanded of HR professionals. You're not expected to be an expert grief counsellor or expert in financial funeral arrangements, but also consider what network of experts you might have to hand that can offer that support as and when you need it. Ideally, it won't be that often, but as we heard earlier, 1 in 3 people have lost someone over the last 3 years. Thankfully, MetLife can help on this front. So no surprise. So we are, in fact, MetLife, for those who may not have heard of us, we are, in fact, the world's largest employee benefits provider. We do have a presence in the UK. We offer group life insurance and also group income protection. And this graphic illustrates the type of support we offer. And what I'd like to pull out in particular is something unique and different that no other provider offers in the UK. It's an exclusive arrangement. We've worked with an organisation that's been providing pre-need, pre-death and at-death support services for 25 million workers in the US over the last 20 years. We've brought that service into the UK, and it consists of free will writing and advice. It consists of a free digital lockbox for employees. So if you want somewhere to put your photos and your important documents and all your passwords, you can put them into effectively a digital set of drawers, and you can give the key to different dependents and members of the family. But it's all stored and accessible, easy to find. And most important, I think, there is access to a free, independent professional advisor on your death so that your dependents can talk about and learn and have that help about arranging your funeral, put that into place. This concierge service will take it over for them. So thank you. That's MetLife. Final point is that I really hope that this has stimulated some thought in your own minds, perhaps some question marks as to what you want to do differently in your organisation. And I just beg of you, please don't let death be the last word. Thank you.